Check. Check. Hi everyone, welcome to the novice quarterfinal round of NUDC 2025. For this round, my name is Aulia. I will be the chair, but I will not be judging alone. I will have a set of panel and I will let them to introduce themselves, starting from Siska.
Hi everyone, my name is Francisca. Best of luck.
All the best.
Hi everyone, my name is Rizky. All the best of luck and have fun for the round.
Hi everyone, I'm Abi. Good luck.
Cool. Before we start, just a really general reminder. First of all, since this room is going to be recorded, so please be very mindful of your gestures as well as the content of your speech. Refrain from what could be potentially sensitive or offensive. Also, secondly, for timer will be provided in the screen here, also at the back here. So please do be mindful of your timer as well. And for all observers, please maintain the decorum. Even if this room is live stream, if you need any documentations, still please ask for consent to the committee and also to me, so that when you have the documentations, you would be sure that all of the people here are consented to be documented. Okay, without any further ado, let's start the round with the motion, "This House regrets the idolizations of historical figures." To open the debate, calling Prime Minister, here.
Test. Am I audible? I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, your honorable judges, my fellow government and opposition team. Today we talk about this house regret the idealization of historical figures. Before I start my speech and anything else, I would like to start with a quote in Indonesia first and then in English. This quote says that setiap orang ada masanya, setiap masa ada orangnya. Every time has its own person. Every person has its own time. This is one of the most important aspect that we'll explain later. But let's just define first. First, the idolization. Idolization refers to when we idolize someone who we see have the capability to become the important person that will influence us. Influence is strong word for us, and we will use that word later. Then the historical figure. Historical figure is actually kind of wide, but let's just say that historical figures refers to a great person who has the influence in towards the history of humankind of a certain country, of a certain civilization, of a certain people. Now, let's go into our framework. The idealization of historical figures is not something new, but here's the one main problem that we see in this motion. When the bad things become good things. Right now, in today's politics, we have seen right-wingers, left-wingers in politics are fighting. And mainly, why? Because they are glorifying historical figures. For example, in Germany, there are quite a lot of right-wingers politics party who idolize Adolf Hitler, which in case Adolf Hitler, yes, indeed, idolized, especially not only in Germany, but across the world, especially for the people who hate the Jews, for the people who maintains that the Jews are the not below subhuman. It is one of the most critical things that we want to expose, how the historical figures who does bad things, but many people saw them as a good thing, as a good person, because they're just okay, this person has the same objection as me, or when they are learning about them at the very, very young age, 6 years old, learning that, oh, Adolf Hitler conquest most of Europe. But then, is he a good person or he's not? But this is one of the important things that we will explain later. Now, let's move into our main argument. First, how do we view the historical figure of idolization? Again, for example, Adolf Hitler is one of the, I say, the most evil man ever exists. He ordered 6 million Jews and started a war that caused 60 million people to die. But again, even in Indonesia, in Bandung, we have seen a Nazi themed coffee shop, which is very, very disrespectful, not only towards the Jews, but also towards Indonesian who died in World War II, towards Singaporean, and for any countries who has been devastated by a war that was started by Adolf Hitler. And why do we praise this such a person? Not only Adolf Hitler, but let's say Saddam Hussein. This might be a controversial figure, but it is the fact that especially in the Middle East, there is a lot of people who support Saddam Hussein, despite the facts that he is doing something wrong, violates the international rules, and not only that, he demanded for Iraq to build a nuclear weapon. This kind of things really reflects how we see the historical figure who was bad, but we saw them as a good person because only maybe first we learn about them at the very first young age. Second, we are immature and doesn't have the capability to define which one bad, which one is good, which one is bad. And the second one is, this is another example. In South America, there is one thing called natur culture. Narco culture, sorry. This culture refers to a glorification about using drugs. And guess who is the most important figures and the most idolized person in South America? It is not only Pablo Escobar. Narco culture born in 1998 when Pablo Escobar at its peak. And this not only exists amongst the people who sell and use drugs, but right now it is just something normal in South America. Sorry, not only South America, but in the entire world. Maybe I'm not trying to generalize something, but maybe when you see someone who has drugs, who use drugs, maybe because they are depressed, let's not talk about why they use drugs. But the main point is, people who use drugs are using Pablo Escobar and glorifying his idea of world when we can sell drugs and use drugs freely. And is drugs a bad thing? Yes, but why these people are doing something that glorifying the drug seller? And I don't want to say the name of person, but I know in my city there's very, very famous person. He was praised by the community because he sell drugs, and he told us that Pablo Escobar was a good thing. And why? By giving a donation towards the people. But then the people have the impression that, okay, Pablo Escobar is a good thing, when the people doesn't know that Pablo Escobar is an evil man who kills not only millions but rather 1,000 people in South America and destroyed the mind of millions of people. And let's talk about politics. When we idolize historical figures, we tend to glorifying for a war, hungry for a war. For example, in Greece, Alexander the Great, and in Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. And this person, again, being used by right-wingers and left-wingers to push towards their hungry for power and hungry for war. This kind of thing, we shouldn't let them into the politics, and we should stop idolizing this kind of people. And the last one is socially. We have seen there is a lot of people who's pushing for communism. Why? Because they saw, during the Joseph Stalin, which is leader of Soviet Union, they were successful. But the main person is that they're only reading history. For that reason, they are missing the whole context of how Stalin killed 30 million Ukrainians and the person of the USSR. And our last point is, when you learn about history, history is about being objective, not subjective. It is one of the points that we will push. When you learn about history, it should be objective, not subjective. By only looking into someone, for example, Rehrabu is a term used for people who support Adolf Hitler. Just because they're idolizing Adolf Hitler, then they will say that, okay, United States is a good person and blah, blah, blah. That's for us, we are proposing this motion and proud this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for the fine speech to open the case from opening opposition. Calling Leader of Opposition, here.
Check. Am I audible? Clarification, whatever I say, just for this debate, and I'll start my speech. And 3, 2, 1. First of all, I would like to give you the characterization and definition about how several keywords for this debate. First, about the idolization. I think idolization, it means that you idolize it. How you idolize it can be two types. First, you can post on your social media picture, quotes, etc. But two, it can from the industry like movie, music, or specific podcast, for example. But two, I think historical figures like the prerequisites from the historical figures is you need to do the big things, means that you have a big impact from your company, from your country, for example. It can be like the knowledge or what you do, for example. It's, for example, like you found the American continent, for example. It means that you do such a big things. That means that you be the historical figures. But who's the actor in this debate? I think there's three actors. First, about the historical figures itself. Two, about the industry. And three, about the environment. Industry, because I think they are get more impact and buying prasarana like from the movie, etc. Because they the actor that introduced the historical figures, etc. But second, I think the environment is the actor who's almost impact in this motion, because I think how they get it, the historical, how they see the historical figures, it's from this from the their POV, for example, what the interest from this debate. First, because the figures is have a more impact. Maybe they given good motivation, good lesson from you, but you appreciate from what they already do. What they need, I think we don't want to people forget about the story, but we don't want to reduce the same mistake if we don't really learn about the history. Okay. The next one is what the function of the history. First, it can be the lesson of the knowledge, because you should because the knowledge you can see, or you can know about you should do this or you should know this. But two, I think it can be the history, it can be that your pride from your culture, for example, your history about your country, for example. So the meanings, the philosophy is not disappear. For example, like Pancasila, or let's say about the several historical figures like Sayate Malik, Soekarno Hatta, etc. Why we idolize of a historical, it's getting more benefits in the end. I think first, the prerequisite from idolize, it's when you realize the value from the historical figures. Means you want to act like them, means that you want to be like them. It's not always you have to follow them 100%, but maybe there's several one or two things that you can get. And of course, I think what you get, it's the goodest one, because they can be someone that have a big name, for example, because there's someone to have a big impact from you. Means you maybe you lost your way, you didn't really have a figure, for example. Then there's a peer, the historical is a peer, means that no, thank you, they have a meaning and they have value for you. And the third one is the benefit. First, people will have an intensive to learn and to know more about the history. Because why? Because characteristic people in status quo, first, they don't really think that historical is really important right now, so they just forget it. If they forget it, means they don't just forget about the historical itself, but also the philosophy why historical it's happened in status quo. But three, how people know about the historical figures. First, it can be from the book, lesson in the academic, or two, it can be from the social media, movie, etc. I think when you use their face, for example, the concept or the context, it's we're not far away from the historical itself. It's not too far away from the characterization from the person, for example. So it means it can be really, if the government say it can be subjective, for example, or yeah, it can be like the false way to you to introduce the historical figures. It just can be like this. I think it's so irrational because I think you just want to protect the name. For example, your big name. For example, if you say idolize, it's fine because you change the image. For example, but nowadays people don't really interest with that. People interest to do something that's viral, something that's catching us. For example, so if you didn't support the idolization of historical figures, man, you support that you will forget the historical figures. People, yeah, to be honest, in status quo, people don't really think that historical is important. But now, people don't really interest with that. People interested, yeah. If government afraid they will know the wrong information, for example, but I think first there's still check and balance. Like information in social media, it's real so massive. So for example, if you scroll in TikTok, Instagram, for example, so the algorithm will also follow it. Means there's more information for you to get more information about the historical figures. But two, I think the characterization from fans is first they're really curiosity, means they will searching as much as they can, means the information is not the limitation. I think like from the good side, just for a good side or the bad side. But B, I think there's a possibility from them to share it to their friends too, or they found the community,
Yo,
for
I-
example, means no thank you, means there is still action balance or discourses in their side. But see, I think there, second argument, there will be more innovation knowledge to that we get because if we know the people from the historical figures, man, we also learn about the historical itself. Means we know that the knowledge that they tell, they know the theory from themselves. Mean if we know it, if we literally learn about it, mean we can learn something about it. Means there's the output. For example, first you can get the same mistake as they do. For example, or B, you can innovate it from the theory. For example, so you will realize you will implement in the status quo in the real life. So yeah, in our what it will be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for the fine speech to extend the case from OG calling Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Hello, am I audible? Good morning, Judge, member of the government team and the opposition team. The reason I'm here to standing here today is to telling you the logical reason why we, as the opening government, regrets the glorification of historical figure. The simple thing is idealization. It seems like you're actually saw them, copy or wanted to be like the same, or maybe wanted to become like your influencer. Because we're actually our point is actually idolization, but we're actually also the point of this motion is actually the historical figure. The thing that I would like to say in this argument that I would like to explain in here is actually I'm really not to understand about the opening opposition team about, like, for example, like how could you idolization historical figure and take the lesson from that when you saw them as a subjective thing. I think that's a dangerous thing when you're saying, when you're learn, and or when you're taking something from historical figure. The second thing, I think we did not against with the historical figure. The point of the opening opposition actually telling us about the history, but we're actually talking about the historical figure in here. We're telling you about how the idolization of the historical figure is actually have so many impact for us, and we did not want to repeat the history again, especially the negative history. I mean, I did not see the history, so it seems like a black and white thing. But I see the history seems kind of like something that really need to saw them as the objective and the subjective thing. We believe that something should be become a lesson. But don't misleading me. I did not agree with the opening's opposition about the idealization of the historical figure. But I think the most logical reason that I said about the being them as the lesson is not wanted to become to repeat the history itself, like my previous partner already explained about a few of the historical figure that happening in many country, especially in the past year. I think when we owe something too much, it is also not really good. I mean, when you're actually like wanted to copy or something like saw the historical figure is some kind of like a subjective thing, it is actually cannot being relevant in our era right now. And when we saw when we idealization of the historical figure, it is seems kind of like you are actually learn and read or some kind of like saw or hear or some kind of like thing. It is seems like a temporary thing, but there's effect is have the long term, because it is have the connection between with our mindset. When we saw the historical figure with the historical figure, it should be objective, but when we learn about when we saw them, it we are actually saw them as the subjective thing, the temporary effect that when we are idolization, when we learn from the historical figure itself. There was that I would like to telling about the my point in here. I think when we are actually idolization, historical figure is not relevant now. For example, like the ideology that the historical figure have in the past year, you would you like applying their ideology in this era when that ideology is not relevant. We are talking about for example like the sovereignty. The past year, the past year, the historical figure in the past year did not have any some kind of like, for example, like the sovereignty, for example, like that. But we are actually have the sovereignty right now. Like this is some kind of like when you want to applying this, and you this in the past year, and you also wanted to apply this in this year. It is cannot connected, and it is cannot like relevant, because it is actually like some kind of like a different thing right now, because we're talking about the idealization of the historical people. We are actually the simple thing, actually it seems kind of like influence people. We did not want this kind of like something like a bad, just a bad historical figure. I don't want to explain that happen or have in there our mindset. And for us, we believe the history cannot be repeat, but history should be to learn. When we are actually idolization. We awe them. We saw them like, oh my god, that was so cool. It is some kind of like you are actually gonna looking them for something like in good in them. The thing that I would like to see in here actually, when we saw or idealization or glorification of the historical figure, it is actually the simple thing that you need to be being critical about what you wanted to idolization. But we did not really regret for this about the idolization, but we regret about how the idealization historical figure sorry, I mean, we regret about the idealization of the historical figure, but we wanted to people to being critical about how this historical figure could really have your impact in your era. Social media can be misleading because historical figure and social media is made from the other perspective. It is something like crucial point of the social media itself. Because when we're talking about historical figure, it is actually we're talking about something like based on the subjective thing. That is why we, the opening government, regret the idealization of historical figure. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for the fine speech to close the opening half of the debate. Calling Deputy Leader Opposition here.
Tes. Audible? Okay. This debate is not solely idealization is good or not for individual, but for the world. That's why I will explain this debate and how is the school it can be looks like. Okay, so how is the school in this thing? Idealization in the status quo. That means you create a story book about someone that historically great. So this is actually need a narrative that create an incentive to begin to grow. So for a company to create the story, right? Because how is this exactly need to produce this maybe some book or maybe some of your media or of your cinematic, for example. This is a great company, right? So this is actually why you need an idealization in the very beginning, because you need to cater a great attentions. So that's why you need to create one of the people that have a historical great. So that's why people can have an interest to buy your book, for example, or watch your movie, for example, and then they have an incentive to know more. So what the whole idea of the government idea is, the history needs to be learned like objectively. But here's the thing: the prerequisite to learn something is you need to interested first about it, right? And I gotta say that in the status quo, our people as are progressive enough to do a check and balance, to do a research, to do they can know about how is the historical figure is actually to be done. And for example, for the Sukarno itself, the first time we know Sukarno is really great, right? So that's why we have a great nationality. That's why we need have a great intention to learn more about the story, for example. But then it's okay that you have still objective, because you still know, you have still a capability to know more about them, and you have still a experience where you can do a Google research for the message or something like that. So that's why that's why this is very important. Okay, let's moving on into the why especially need historical figures. Okay. Because we need symbol and hope. Korean Star School happened. There is so much artists or people for like KDM, for example, who can remind that Indonesia they still have a good government, for example. But realize that how human face are very difficult phases, like Indonesia, for example, that face aggression before the Indonesia have their historical figure who really great, so they can have a good nationality. Or maybe we have Prophet Muhammad that considered one of the greatest historical figure, that he was the real example that can we Muslim follow. When I see that I was in despair in the world that going to be broken, and I can see no longer how I can do this thing, and I can see I don't really know how I survive this one, something like that. I can see the proof that actually how to face all this struggle. So that's why this is idolization is needed, because we need to create incentive to create a narrative of the historical figures, so they can be learned. So that's why this is very, very important. And okay, and then let's moving on to about the whole idea of the government cases. Okay, they only talk about the controversial figures, right? Okay,
the thing they take as a sample like Saddam Hussein or maybe Pablo Escobar, for example. But here's the thing: perspective happen. If you are an American, you can against Saddam Hussein. If you are no, you are gonna support the Saddam Hussein. So there's not gonna be like you gonna be like automatically irrational. No, it's gonna be like that. We still say that people is still progressive, and then that there's only play on only the bad idol who are really do the bad thing. But here's the thing: if because the idealization happen and the people in some school is progressive, they can know like they can take the example like maybe okay, let's take the ball from the Pablo Escobar, for example. Yeah, they not like gonna be like automatically sell the drugs, for example, like just gonna do some bad thing and something like that. But they can be amazed that okay, the Pablo Escobar, even if he is a bad person, they still have a heart. So that's why this is very great for the this idealization, because yeah, you know, there's not people is not really that irrational. Okay, and then yeah, if you are talking is what history is need to be learned objectively. That's also happen in outside of the house, because yeah, there and even more progressive, because you already created the attention of the people itself and can create an incentive to learn about the history. Okay, and then let's move into the about the why. Okay, well, let's move into the mitigation. Why not telling the whole truth in the is okay? Okay, let's talk about human nature. Human psychologists are always have like awareness, because they have an instinct to survive, right? They gonna be like skeptic if you are just point one of the figure mistake, for example. So you are was really what you are has yeah, you are really saying this your historical figure, maybe example, the at the first time you point that this person already killed some man or something like that. Their intention and their interest is not gonna be it's not gonna be happen, and that's why their incentive to be learned and their incentive to be know more about historical figure, about historical story is not gonna be happen, because they create, because they yeah, because okay, that's why our world is our world is better, because because we create the intention to know the figure more, and we create the intention to the people to know the yeah, they can really know about how they can learn about what to think in from this figure, for example. Okay, okay, let's talk about what the what the real of the human, what the really needs of from the by human who needs really, what the things that's really needed by a human is not just you are doing like a good thing, for example. You need for it to create an inspiration, you need visualization of something that doing big, for example. Like okay, as an example for Alexander the Great, you know that Alexander the Great is like already conquered the world, for example. But this could create you for inspiration, for example, not to conquer for exactly, but it can create the incentive and motivation to you, maybe for win the NUDC, for example, because yeah, you know that's this the big move create a big incentive and create a big motivation. That's why we need the historical figure is like to be having idealization in the very beginning. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader Opposition, for the fine speech to open the closing half of the debate. Calling Member of Government, here.
Yes. Whatever it is, arguments that I bring upon this debate, it does not reflect any of my personal beliefs, nor any of my personal ideology. Henceforth, I will start this debate with an account of 3, 2, 1. When you place someone at a podium, you will see no fault in them.
Hence, you will only walk in blindness. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start this debate by first refuting the self-negating argument from the OO, second of all, creating our identity from the opening government, and third of all, at our own arguments. Now, let us first start by engaging with the arguments that have been brought forth by the OO. They utilize the exemplary of the founding fathers of the United States of America. Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of a negative effect of idolization. First, they justify the proliferation of idolizing these founding fathers while ignoring how hundreds of years that Native Americans within the United States have been killed, have been displaced throughout the history of that founding of United States. Second of all, they justify the slavery of thousands of Africans that have been displaced from their own countries for the successes of United States. Now, this is what happens when you idolize, when you place them upon a podium, when you ignore the negative sides of their own history. Then OO fell into the trap of justifying history through history to be ignored. Furthermore, to say that idolization is to create a story is utterly blind towards the meaning of idolization itself, which we will bring forth upon this debate. And now, second of all, the OG has mischaracterized of what idolization is truly means. It is not only influencing, but what idolization truly is will be explained later on by us. And second of all, they have not offered an alternative approach which will bring more benefit within their side. So now first, let's start by setting up a couple of things that will happen within our debate. This is an evaluative motion. Hence, on our side, we'll prove that we will bring more benefits and the opposition side will bring more negative within their world. In our world, we describe the non-idolization of historical figures as first, where historical figures serve as a subject of study and to which to see what successes or failures that have been done before. Second of all, we do not discriminate the successes of historical figures, but rather utilize these historical leaders' lessons as a study to not repeat the past or even to utilize it in adapting to the current context. Now, second of all, the idolization of historical figures goes further than just admiring or influencing people. Idol, within the traditional terms, means to place someone as a god. It means God. Hence, the idolization of historical figures frame the most supreme or the most perfect form of exemplary is of that human historical figure itself. Now, these examples in the form of how China idolizes, for example, Mao Zedong, or even how Marxist followers idolizes Karl Marx or Lenin while ignoring the negative sides of what they have did within the past. Hence, they visualize their own self to fulfill the legacy left by these idols by achieving that characterization of that figure itself as they are the perfect ones within their eyes. Now, let us go within the arguments. First of all, the idolization of historical figures, as defined previously, pertains to an individual vision of what denotes as the most peak form of what they have to be. We believe this is dangerous from the reasoning of first, the maximum capacity I will achieve is of that individual while ignoring the current climate of social, political, etc. To replicate that figure whilst ignoring the current reality into suiting that aforementioned historical incidents is utterly irrelevant because first, it creates an ignorance towards the true flow of what historical achievement itself. Idolizing a certain figure comes from seeing the successes of what that character has done. But often enough, we know that the context of history in the past is very different from where we are right now. For example, Mao Zedong figure is historically idolized in China for putting forth successes economically while putting aside the reality that he caused a massive genocide through the Cultural Revolution itself. Hence, to idolize is to replicate. To replicate is to justify the genocide as a reasoning for us to achieve the end result itself. Second of all, we purposely place a blind eye towards these negative sides of history to which your historical figure have been involved. This indoctrination and internalization of individuals towards historical figures fails in genuinely evaluating what is wrong or what is right about history itself. Hence, within this world, the harms appear in repeating the negative sides of history on the negative means to achieve the ends itself. Now, second of all, is that history long has been written by the winners. As we know, the winners is always the one that decide the history.
Oh,
It
yeah.
has long been proliferated of what winners decide is what is right and what is wrong. Within the reality of history, we only idolize of what has been framed as to be glorified. Hence, at the end of the day, you cannot ascertain that in the first place, the idolization of historical figure itself is correct. Hence, it will limit our own perception to why to truly learn in the first place from this history. Yes, I'll take it.
We know such rational is justified by action, but because try to oppose status quo with the people is correct and can't do check and balance. And learning about the story is also happen on us, and our argument is prerequisite.
Okay, I do not hear that. Now I'm continuing on with our argument. Is that third of all, now within our side, we have offered the alternative, which is within our world, we will not idolize any historical figures, but we will place ourselves as an external subject, learning from that individual rather than internalizing that individual within ourselves. So what will happen, or what is the benefit that we bring on our side? First of all, ladies and gentlemen, we see historical figures as a subject of history to which we learn from as an external actor, rather than internalizing that individual itself. Within our side, henceforth, we can learn even the negative side of history itself because we do not place them as within on top of the podium, or to see them as a perfect exemplary of what we have to become. And then second of all, then we do not justify any means towards a successful end. The context now is to see the mistake and to correct the means while trying to achieve the same end by utilizing a more proper or a more moral means. For example, for example, I can see and agree with, like, for example, the Mao Zedong byproduct of economical success that have been achieved by China. But because I do not idolize him, I do not have to replicate the steps that he did, which is cultural revolution, genocide, and forced practices to achieve those steps. Henceforth, within our side, we have presented you the harms that only happen with the opposition and the benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Member of Government, for the fine speech. To open the place from closing opposition, calling Member Opposition. Here.
Check. Okay. Before I start my debate, a little bit of disclaimer that anything that comes from my mouth and during this debate is only solely for the debate content. So, without further ado, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, imagine yourself in the midst of 2020, or in the midst of the huge altercation that happened in the world. You're a black person that is living, that is happening to be in the United States of America, that is dealing with a lot of things, dealing with a lot of discriminations, and you don't have historical figures such as MLK or Muhammad or the Malcolm X to motivate you or to bring you up to go for the movements that you can go for. So before I start my arguments, I would like to first renote or remind you guys that this is a counterfactual motion. We are expected to prove that or to convince that the what ifs of the reality that might happen if it didn't happen in the first place. So let's take a look at this motion backwards, and I'm going to do that after this. First of all, I would like to rebut some things that already were mentioned by the opening benches. Both of the opening benches, they only talk about the good figures, the bad figures, who do you want to idolize, and what will happen, the impact that will happen in the future if you were to idolize one or the other side. So it's only looking forward. We didn't look backwards as this motion wanted us to be. So first of all, some rebuttals to the opening government. The opening government mentioned about that the problems that happen is that there are many bad things, but still idolize. So we can accept that there are some negative figures that are being idolized and it can harm some people. But let's take a look in a bigger scale. What already happened right now in the status quo and who has already been idolized. So when we take a look at the bigger picture, the majority and the likelihood of the people that were idolized back then is higher on the good end of the day, in the good end. For example, when they talk about Nazi, yes, but how many percentage of people who are far extremist in who are supporting the Nazi in the current status quo? But how many people right now? The percentage of people who are against the Nazi because they have the they have the historical figures that are fighting against the Nazi, that are fighting alongside the human rights. So the bigger scale, this is already flipping their whole arguments of the whole thing is only, if you're idolizing the negative people, you will get the bad things. Next thing that I want to talk about, they also mentioned that when history is being subjective, it can be misleading through social media, posts, this, etc., etc. In the current status quo that is already happening, there are many channels, sources where you can get information, verified information from independent sources. So even if there are some misleading informations, there are different sources with much different informations. Remember what your middle school teacher taught you. When there are many sources, learn from different sources. Learn and compare later. Learn and compare and understand. Use your rational mind. How do I characterize this? As a human being, you have rational mind and you can differentiate between the good and the bad. And when you compare between sources, then we'll be able to know which one is correct, which one is not. So that already destroys the argument from the opening end of the government. The next thing I want to talk about, the opening opposition. Opening opposition. They also mentioned things that are on the same note as the opening government. They also mentioned mostly about the focus of the impact that will happen if we were to talk about the good ones. So that alone doesn't win you the debate. So first of all, from the closings opposition, we would like to offer you some things that are exclusive to our bench. Let's take a look at the motion backwards. So what happened in the past and why we don't regret this? First of all, you are in the midst of a crisis. You're in the midst of identity crisis. You're in the midst of psycho wars or anything like that. And then you see that there are historical figures that already happened in the past that is talking about the things that you want them that you want yourself to understand and to use to motivate yourself. For example, let's take a look at Martin Luther King. He's the epitome of social justice movement, especially in the black people area. So if you're a black person, what do you look for? You're looking for an icon for motivation. You're looking for someone who you can use as an icon. It already happened, right? And we can see the impact that already happened. We can see that they could go through that, and now they're rebuilding their identity. They're using they're empowering themselves, and it's a good thing. So next thing that I want to talk about, Mahatma Gandhi and Mandela, for example, they're Nobel Peace Prize winners. So it's about the peace of the world. When there are many things that are already happening in the status quo, there are many things that are happening in global scale that are already wars, this and that. These people that are the vulnerable actors, how do we characterize them? They're gonna look forward into the icons that they can look for, and so that they can be able to fight against the oppression because they have someone who they can look for. Next thing, Albert Einstein, about the scientist. When you look at Albert Einstein as a scientist, he achieved many things. So you as a scientist, you want to do more further research. You want to do this and that because of the idolization that already happened. And we do not regret that. Next thing that I want to talk about. Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, these things are religion based historical figures. They are historical figures in the context of the debate because they mention that these historical figures are the ones that give influence, and they did influence for many years, hundreds or even thousands of years. So these things are sustainable, long-term impact that already we felt till this day, from back then, from 1400 years ago, from 2000 years ago, we already feel the impact that is sustainable in our side of the house. This is very exclusive. Why? Because we can show you that these people that believe in these religions, they do what these people, these historical figures that are idolized more. So that is why we, as the closing opposition, are very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Member of Opposition, for the fine speech to close the whole case from government. Calling government whip, here.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to say in this debate is just for debate purposes only. I'm Ivan Tandrian from Pelita Harapan, and I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, OGs fails to explain why people are idolizing someone in the very first place. They lowering what is idolization itself, which we already fill this gap as my first speaker already explained to you. Okay. Glorified that historical figures or the history is good for learning proposing. Then why should panel buy your case, since we can also achieve it in our side, and even better because all that benefit, for example, learning about history, etc., we can do it without idolizing any of them. We can just respect them, for example, any of the historical figures. And then I don't understand what is OO trying to tell us. We can just read books or browse on the internet, or even we can get that historical knowledge in our civics class without idolizing anyone, since there will be a lot of harm when we idolizing some figure, since idolizing meaning you put someone within a pedestal and think that you want to be like them. And I guess you already had a misconception about idolization, because idolization is not creating a great story of someone. As my first speaker already explained to you, what is it? And then CG, if you only want to compare which one is good and which one is bad, you don't need to idolizing them, which I already explained before. If you're idolizing someone, you put them in the podium. This is cute, yet not exclusive. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have to acknowledge that the idolization of historical figures is bringing way more harms than good. Letting people idolizing some historical figures will let them stuck and can adjust to the current world. Let me explain. First, historical figures live in a different era with us. When you start to idolizing someone, you start making them as the point or the center in everything. Your point of view will also based on your idol. This is extremely harmful because you start you start making them as a standard when doing things. You will never to try anything beyond your capability or even your idol capability, because you're idolizing them and think that they're always right, and etc. And B, since your POV is based on your idol, you start manifesting their life into yours, which already irrelevant since you and your historical figures live in a different era. I believe we all here in this room have got right, like closing a position already tells you. But idolizing means you put them as a god itself, which is it's wrong and it's gonna fall into false worship. Okay, this is even we I'm not gonna tell you much the doctrine about the religion, because we all here also this and also the society know that in every religion we are not allowed to idolizing something else, even if it's a religion, historical figures, and something else or anyone else beside our God itself, because you will fall into false worship, of course, which is this is harmful. You will act accordingly like your idol, no matter it's good or bad, since you're idolizing them too much. And then historical figures or historical story is made by them who win. They can frame anyone else is good or bad, which we are not going to know what is truly right, what is who and why this is bad, because if we're already set up with historical figures that we think they're right, we will stop learning because we think that the other is bad or wrong. This made we even lazier and not critical about the historical itself, and we're not gonna learn about the history anymore. And we in CO, we offer you what other benches of the house didn't have, which is where his historical figures from which is we see historical figures from an external perspective rather than internalizing them, internalizing their own values within our heart. Henceforth, within our world, without the existence of idolization, we could have learn history much faster and reveal the accurate sides of it. For example, the idolization of Sukarno during his time of presidency, you cannot notice the negative sides of his history, like Ganyang Malaysia and etc. etc. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, and our panel today, we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Government Whip, for the fine speech to close opposition's case and the whole debate, calling opposition whip here, here.
I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, when K-popers in the status quo idolize their idols, does that mean that they justify everything that their idols did? We believe that people are rational in the current status quo. So even if your favorite, if your friend who's a K-popper, their idol suddenly did something bad, they will completely understand them rather than justifying that everything that they did. Why is this? We believe that people in our side are rational. When people idolizes historical figures, we believe that people are we believe that they understand what is bad and good, and they can rationalize it in their idolization. We believe that people are not perfect. We are not talking about we believe that we believe that historical figures are not perfect. We are not talking about figures who is committing genocide like Hitler. We believe that there are many historical figures who are bringing good to the world with that actually does bad things, but we believe that there are not perfect people. What the government side fails to understand is that we are rational human beings, and idolizing someone, it doesn't mean that we want to fully manifest their life into ours. But we believe that these people is someone to look up to. We can actually take good from everything that they did in their life. So first of all, I'm going to be explaining the characterization on our side even better than the opposing opposition side. We believe that historical figures are such a big part of every country's history, right? It's gonna affect our books, our mindset of a society, and how the government works structurally in the current status quo. It dramatically shifts the whole dynamic of society, and especially like how in America's whole life changed ever since Martin Luther King, as my first speaker said, era happened and how it changed ever since. And we believe that it shaped one of the biggest movements, right, in the U.S. history to fight for the rights of black people. What the government side only mentions is the worst of the worst historical figures and focuses only in it. And they only delve in it, and they doesn't understand that there are lots of thousands of historical figures that actually bring a good impact to society as a whole. We believe that in our side, the idolization of historical figures have brought such a positive impact to society, shaped it like no other, and fight for change in movements in sectors like movements, research, studies, and etc. So we believe that we believe that in the current debate, the government side is not charitable to our side at all, because we believe that people who idolizes bad historical figures are a minority. So, like, how many people in your life actually idolizes Hitler? Nobody, right? We believe that in there are bad figures like Hitler, Osama bin Laden. People who idolizes them are only a small percentage of the people who actually idolizes historical figures in history. And because they are a small minority of people, they don't even matter, because the majority of people globally knows that they are bad, knows what kind of harm they did. They are educated enough to actually learn about the bad things that have happened in the current status, in the history of the world. We believe that people are actually knowledgeable enough, educated enough, and like, especially in the current status quo, the opening opposition already mentioned about social media, but we will fully explain this and actually explain how does it actually affect the idolization of historical figures. So social media is already a big part of society, right? So people who idolizes historical figures can actually search up the bad things they have done throughout history. So it's not fair for the government side to say that idolization is bad because most people have access to social media, education in school, and learn about them, and have a rational mind enough to filter and sort through which historical figures to actually idolize to. Because most of the time, people who idolizes historical figures are not people who idolizes Hitler, but who idolizes people like Martin Luther King in general. So what does this prove? We prove that in our side, we are able to be actually rational even if we are idolizing historical figures. We believe that because in the current status quo, people are rational, and even if people are irrational, that is only a small amount of people, and only a minority of people, so they don't even matter. Yes?
So you think that the whole population of China, which worships, will idolize Mao Zedong, is a small minority? Thank you.
What I want to explain is that they brought up China. The fact that they don't idolize their leaders, they are actually indoctrinated and forced to actually support and worship their government, because if they don't, they will get killed. So we believe that on our side, we believe that I want to be rebutting some of the government side. They mentioned that idolization is not important because subjectivity is more important. I'll be flipping this by saying that subjectivity is actually important, because one of the biggest, I want to be taking an example is that one of the biggest musicals, Hamilton, they have such a big impact on America. Hamilton in itself is not a perfect person. He actually did a lot of problematic things in the past, right? But why is this idolization of play about Hamilton important for America's history? We believe that this can enlighten and make people more interested in history, to dissect what the previous political figures did back then. Because even we believe that this can enlighten and make people more interested in learning about history, to dissect and actually learn. And so idolizing them doesn't mean that I justify every single thing wrongdoings that Hamilton did. No, thank you. We believe that it doesn't mean I justify it, because even if he cheated on his wife, and he still made a great impact on the U.S. history, pushing America for independence and ending their war. This is what Hamilton did, even if he did some wrongdoings in his life. We believe that subjectivity in the current status quo is important, because it teaches us to look at things in a bigger scale, not only specifically only their wrongdoings this figure did. So what is the impact of this? People can learn and dissect what to actually look up to, what to actually idolize in their historic in the figures of historical history. So even if they did some wrongdoings, there are still things to be learned about from these historical figures, because on the government side, people will avoid every single political figure to learn about, because almost every political figure have done bad things in the past. So we are not turning a blind eye as the government side, but we understand that as a political figure, you are probably not able to please everyone, and what I think is bad is different from someone else. So on our side, we focuses on the bigger picture. Even if these historical figures are not perfect, idolizing them doesn't make us blindly follow everything that they said. We are proud to oppose.
Thank you, Opposition Whip, for the fine speech that marks the end of this debate. Just gentle reminder for the future rounds. Debate can be heated sometimes, but please maintain your expressions, your gestures, as well as your language later on. So feel free to shake hands and return to the main hall to wait for the announcement. Thank you, everyone, for the debate.